So a little bit about me. I founded Peridot Partners nearly 11 years ago. I'm currently on my third and fourth trusteeships. I have been recruiting to public not-for-profit organisations for over 20 years now. I've become increasingly interested in boards and governance over the last 10 years or so. I found that recruiting good board members for organisations who only then went on to become frustrated and not be able to deliver what they wanted to do when they aspired to be board members was deeply frustrating, which led me into trying to understand more about governance, board dynamics. And I feel that, whilst I do describe myself as a bit of a governance geek, I'm more interested in the human dynamics at board level and the things that really do affect, how boards perform. Obviously, the governance structures are important and people need to know what good governance is, but it's the human dynamics that really make things tick or can really destroy a board environment. So I'm currently with Getting on Board, which is around getting more people into trusteeship and supporting organisations to promote trusteeship to their staff as a development thing, as a philanthropic thing, and also to help charities who don't know about recruiting trustees and struggle with trustee recruitment. We give them guidance to do that better. So, as I said, I wanted to kick off to share some ideas about the characteristics of a high-performing board and get you thinking about where you are and what else you may be able to do to improve board performance. We can then share some thoughts on the barriers to that and any challenges that you might have, and then how we can share ideas to overcome those issues and make progress on the boards that we're either working with, for, or connected to. So as I said, we've got up to 60 minutes, a bit less now, and I'll leave most of that for discussion. But this early bit is about provoking your thoughts. The idea is that you take away something practical that can work for you to be able to implement today and become a better board tomorrow. And for me, that'll be success. So very simple slides, and I'll be very happy to send these to everybody afterwards. Just going to shift something out of the way. Right, so 5 key features of excellent boards. So the theme of human dynamics will keep coming up, but positive human dynamics are really important. Good boards have people that demonstrate the right sort of behaviours. They have the ability to interact effectively with each other, support and work with each other. They're a team. They're an absolute team in any sense of the word, and they have the ability and the culture to challenge amongst themselves or itself, enabled by the existence of a real diverse range of thinking styles, backgrounds, attitudes, to bring diverse perspectives to it. So we're looking for positive human dynamics, and this is a whole webinar in itself. So I'm just touching on the themes at the moment, but it's about the people, the behaviours, and the culture ultimately. And the board environment will have a high level of self-awareness, lots of constructive challenge, and a real passion and commitment that people bring to it. And the passion and commitment, just to rest on that for a moment, that's about stimulating stretch and strengthening ideas that other people bring. That's passion, that's commitment. It's about taking something, really listening to it and extending the conversation further, helping people to achieve thinking or being able to implement ideas that they hadn't initially thought of, and that will take the organisation further. So the board will effectively facilitate the executives to perform beyond their own ambitions and expectations, if you can get the dynamics right. The second element, the second key feature, is that the board is generative and relevant. Okay, so what do we mean by that? So we talk a lot about the governance, the risk management, the fiduciary work of trustees. The word trustee is about things are in your trust, things shouldn't go wrong on your watch. And absolutely, that's all critical to the role, but really, that's not all of it. That's half of it. The rest of it is the generative side. It's about how you can add value, or how board members add value for organisations. And that might be relevant support for the CEO execs. It might be ambassadorial in respect of bringing sector knowledge, expertise, connections, partnerships. It might be that you're just able to see perspectives and horizon scan for opportunities that the organisation itself, because of the remit it has, just can't see, doesn't have the time and space to see, or is not in those areas. Great boards help organisations to seize opportunities. The third key feature is that they're performance focused. So what that means is that people are on that board are clear about the contribution that they can make. They know why they're there, and they know what the board is seeking to try and achieve beyond obviously good scrutiny and good governance. Clear expectations are part of that, and that all starts very much from the attraction phase, before you've recruited trustees, setting very, very clear expectations about what the role is and how you expect board members to contribute, what that contribute looks like in sort of time and culture, behaviours, and they also are happy to be accountable. So the board are happy to set objectives and hold themselves to account for them, share those with executives and stakeholders, and individually board members are happy to be held to account too. They plan for succession, the fourth key feature. So they proactively create the future, not just replace the past. So when we get asked to do recruitment for organisations and they say, well, our finance person's leaving, this person's leaving, that person's leaving, we think we need to replace those, we will challenge that and say that's good. I mean, obviously you need a strong finance base, of course you do. But, are those people necessarily the people you need for the next phase of your development? Have you done a skills audit? Do you really understand that you've got people that can support the strategy effectively and not just scrutinise, but bring additional value to that? And they'll plan. I think the key word is here, plan. Much better to recruit, a chair, a board leader from within than somebody from outside. But how do you do that? And how do you make sure you haven't got too many people coming off at any one time? Phasing succession is really important. And the second point there is about no hesitation in replacing and recruiting new people. I've never finished a full term in my trusteeship, and that is by my choice. I've always done the second, been appointed to the second term, but always left with about a sort of year or, after about 5 years in the trustee roles I've had to date, because I felt my job was done. I felt that new people could add more value and take on the next stage. And I think that people should be selfless in that respect. An organisation should be more willing to move people on when they feel that they serve the purpose that they should or have needed in the past, if it's not so relevant now. And the fifth key feature is an obvious one. It's about diversity. We all know about the benefits of diversity. The key challenge to diversity is attracting people, but it's more than just the characteristics that most people tend to think about, which is why we talk about thinking styles, cultural backgrounds, experiences, and the whole range of things that go with that. A quote I love, a truly effective board is one that's open to scrutiny on all levels. So that's individually and as a board. It's the processes, it's the procedures, it's the behaviours that they're scrutinising, it's the skill sets, it's the dynamics, it's the attitudes of people. And, I'll go as far as to say the best boards I work with will all call people out on, if they see behaviours that aren't supportive of the positive environment that you want, or just not the agreed behaviours. People are aware of the dynamics and will support the chair and support people to get that right. And people are just open to take feedback. And I think that's the key to that quote. So another summary slide here, in a sense, coming away from the board a bit more to the board member. So what do you look for if you're going to have a high performing board and you want board members to contribute to that? What do you look for in them? There's 5 key things here for me. So I look for people that will own their performance rather than having, the status consciousness that you might find on 20th century boards rather than 21st century boards, where people wanted to be on boards because it was good for their ego. They were on several boards, you know, it was good fun, it's good to be seen now, you know, they want to contribute. But actually, it's about owning performance. I want people that want to come and do something. They can add some value, and they're excited by that, and they're going to be happy to deliver that. They're deeply committed to one board rather on lots on a superficial level. If you're going to do it properly. And that's an ethos that I like to, talk about a lot when people are on a board. You know, it's an opportunity to really have an impact for a short period of time, make the most impact you can. Appreciate diversity and aware of the risks of groupthink. There's nothing worse than people saying, yeah, I agree, or, you know, somebody's made a point and then somebody else makes a very similar point. Don't do that. Let's think critically, even if we agree with that point, and that might have been the point we were going to make. Let's have a little think about actually how you can inject some positive challenge into that by coming at it from a different angle. And that's it's much easier to do if you've got people that think that way, think differently, from their difference in background. Creative versus protective. Yes, protective is important. We talked about that. You know, you need to protect the resources and the organisation's reputation and everything else. But the creative part is what we're really looking for going forward now. How can you help create a positive future? You know, if you're a charity, how can you overcome this issue sooner? How can you do more during your term to help this organisation move on? And that's about creativity and thinking and taking calculated risks rather than being, ultra protective. Now, obviously, every board's different, every environment's different, and at some times you need to be protective. But on the whole, we're looking for that creativity too. And then entrepreneurial versus risk averse as a start point. Yes, sometimes you need to be very risk averse to pull an issue apart properly and know where you're at. But actually, let's be can do. Let's think about how we can take opportunities first and foremost, rather than stop the conversation by risk aversity and negative thought. Just spend a moment giving my view on that. So when I talk to boards about how you get and maintain high performance, it all starts with a really positive induction. So you set the culture almost before in the recruitment process, but an induction is critical, but it's also ongoing, and it's also something where trustees have to self-induct on an ongoing basis. So you don't do your induction day and feel that you're done. So I joined Tavistock Institute recently, and I'm trying to set up meetings with all the senior staff members to understand what they do, how they do it, what the projects are they're involved in, what their challenges and opportunities are, and I'll expect to do that on a regular basis. I'll sit in on talks that they run and programs that they lead, and I will do that throughout my term so that I can feel that I really have an empathy and understanding of their business. I spoke to a hospice the other day who demonstrated some really strong characteristics, a really great board and a really good chair, and they make trustees go out and visit other hospices every year to get a wider perspective and bring back ideas. They get their trustees to do a ward round at least once a year, and they see that the development is ongoing. It's difficult, and there's no one clear answer, because the culture and the history is different everywhere. What I've tended to do with organisations like this is come in and talk to the board. So the chief executive tends to, bring somebody in to help open the eyes a little bit on, what the role of a modern board is, and to help them hold a mirror up to themselves and the lost opportunity, because actually, that a good board that's bringing lots of relevance and support for the organisation, helps that organisation speed itself forward. So how do you make the argument to them that actually what they're doing isn't as helpful as it could be, and how do you start to take them on the road towards looking at how they can become more effective? And usually that's some sort of a board review, maybe in a board meeting, show them, a TED talk about modern boards, or get some speakers in that will do it free. Do a mini board review and look at the characteristics that they've got compared to what high performing boards have. The open recruitment one is all about diversity, isn't it? It's all about bringing in a range of different people to think differently. If they continue to perpetuate the same sorts of people, friends of friends in the networks, that's the worst sort of board. So all of this, But I would say you need to think about how you can creatively hold up the mirror so that they can realise that they're holding the organisation back. Okay, because actually these people care about the organisation, they want it to succeed. So how can you help them to see that actually they're the problem in a sense? And they might not all be a problem. You know, when we do these board reviews with organisations, and it starts off with a behavioural audit, or you know, we'll look at what they're doing and what they're not doing. So for example, having no terms is a real problem. Having no succession plans is a real problem. What tends to happen is you get initial resistance, but then you get a group of people on that board that say, wow, we absolutely get it. It sounds quite exciting and we want to come on this journey. So you need a bit of support with that bit, how you start to move them along. And then once you've got a group of people inside the board that are pushing for that change, you'll be able to make that change. You'll start to be able to make those changes, but it will probably take time. It's a tricky one in student unions. And we've got an experienced person in Ben who might have some views on this too here. We do a lot of work with student unions, and you know, we see a lot of governance across student unions, and you know, some have gone for the external chair, and that's a controversial issue in itself. I don't think that you necessarily need to do that. I think the problem you've got is that your external trustees are overbearing. That's what it sounds like to me, and they potentially don't understand that their role is to you know, support and grow and develop and give you know, the young people that probably mostly young people that are coming onto the board each year you know, the right sort of governance experience. So they're not listening as much as they're talking, and that's a cultural issue, and it's an issue of understanding their role. So back to high performing boards, do these people understand truly what their role is and how that differs in the student union from another board? They'd be the questions that I'd be suggesting you look at. Characteristics that we should all be looking for in fellow board members, and when we're looking at recruiting. The coaching style is critically important, because, and the listening first and responding second with the wisdom. So it's not about your ego, what you know, and proving that you know it. Again, it's about how you can have people that can come in, really truly understand, listen to the challenges of the organisation, and only then, you know, use their wisdom and experience to suggest, you know, options and solutions. Really important that you don't have people that are overbearing and wanting to, well, it comes from a point of ego, doesn't it? Wanting to show how clever they are on any board. We just don't want that. That's just old school. Absolutely. I think that, so we've done a lot of work with IOSH, the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, very prominent at the moment and doing some great work about health and safety in the workplace. But they're global, and we've worked with them for over 10 years on developing their governance, very member-led, but they have balanced that, redressed the balance with more external NEDs on their boards, and they've introduced very clear behavioural codes of conduct and training, development, role profiles, induction. So you have all of these things that people coming in to a board, you know, from a, you know, passionate about the cause, the organisation that they're there for, but passion isn't enough. And they need to understand, you know, how to operate. And you can couch it all in developmental. You know, they need to know how to operate at board level effectively and in collaboration with others. And you know, it's a great opportunity for these people to develop the sorts of coaching and listening skills that can support them. Not everybody is willing to do that, and you have this trade-off, though, don't you? Between do you really want the high-profile person, whatever the board is, with the wrong behaviours? But maybe they bring something very special, or do you want people all with the right behaviour in the culture, but maybe you lose a little bit of profile? It's a decision for you. I think what you need to do is own that decision, though. So sometimes we'll get a brief where, so another example, organisation on the Isle of Wight needed a new chair. They're very well run, great executive, great board. They wanted somebody that would be, you know, hugely ambassadorial and would bring them basically access to more high net worth individuals. Now, I wouldn't normally subscribe to that as the chair because there's a very clear board leadership role, but we needed to find somebody with those things, and they were willing to compromise on the board leadership elements for what that could do for the organisation. And it was a very clearly thought through decision that everybody understood that made it work. So vice chair and others on the board would step up and each be leaders at the same time and work more collaboratively, recognizing that the chair would be bringing something very special from their very high profile role. So you can have the high profile member, to summarize, that brings a bit of maybe what's not perfect, but as long as you recognize very clearly and people understand and make allowances for that, that can be okay too. It's this complicated thing, the board, isn't it? And every board is different. You know, you have fundraising boards, you have boards with members on, you have boards with young people on, you have lots of change, not very much change, you know, and it needs to be right for your organization. So owning and recognizing the decisions and why you're bringing those people on is very important. Okay.
Thank you.
So some of the potential barriers that I was thinking about when I was looking at the next bit of this discussion was some of the things that I've seen, and it can be that a chief executive is too controlling. And one of the barriers to having a high performing board will be the barrier that is the CEO, because a high performing board is more challenging, difficult to work with at times, and they will resist making the changes that are necessary to support high performance on the board level, because effectively they want to control it. And I hear this a lot. I hear people say that they're not tackling poor performance, or people attending meetings or reading papers effectively because they're only volunteers, and actually they do quite a lot of good. And I don't think that's acceptable. Yes, you're volunteering and you wouldn't have, you know, the contract. So if you were paid to be on this board, you have a very different psychological contract with the organisation. Okay. Now you choose to do that. And because you choose to take on this role, it doesn't mean that it should be any less professional or rigorous than if you were paid. Okay, I wouldn't want to be paid for the trustee roles. I'm doing it because I want to do it. The point here is that, yes, you are volunteers, but actually you need to operate more. The chair needs to understand that the board is a team that needs to operate in the best way that it can. And teams operate well when people are very clear about their roles and how they contribute to that, and that there are objectives. So I recommend, when I'm talking to boards, that the chair or the vice chair, if the chair doesn't want to do it, will give every board member an opportunity once a year to have a conversation. Now, how formal you want to make that, I actually resist the formal. I think it should be informal, just to talk about, well, this is what you said you wanted to achieve this year. Did you manage to do that? You know, has being on the board, you know, met your expectations? How have you been frustrated? Now, what could we do that would improve your experience as a board member? You know, how do you feel about all of these things? So that's a performance conversation, because you're talking about reflecting on how the board's operated, how individuals have operated. And just because you're volunteers doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a performance conversation once a year. You know, for a new trustee, it could be that the chair checks in after month 1, month 3, month 6, month 12 too, just to say, how are things? As much for them as it is for, you know, for the individual, to know that things are right and to gain insight and understanding. So shrugging it off as if you're only a volunteer, you come along, you do your bit, is not acceptable for me. And I think that board performance, team performance is more important than that. If you care about the calls, you need to know what your role is and how you can contribute, and you want some feedback on it. Communication and collaboration, isn't it? It's about forming, you know, groups of people that want to contribute to a project or, you know, something that's going on. And that's not always the obvious people, because I think being on a board is about an individual's development. You know, it's the payback we get, isn't it, for volunteering? And that can be sometimes getting involved in something that you have no experience in because you want to learn about that. Having the culture to push in, to be able to challenge, to take on new things, to be supported to grow. I'm not sure I'm answering your question entirely, because I keep coming back with theories and things that I see, but I think that you need to gather others and try and get the culture where more people are pushing that way. So I talked a little bit about the CEO, and I think that most CEOs are glad to have a good board that's supportive and can add some value. Weak chair was next on my list, because you know, if you have a high performing board, you can't have a high performing board without a decent chair, in my opinion. I've got another session that I can do, and maybe I'll put it on about the characteristics of a high-performing chair. But the problem is that with a weak chair, so the CEO runs the organisation, the chair runs the board. If you've got a chair that doesn't know how to run a board and a team effectively, then you can't have high performance. But I'll leave that one there for today. Where expectations are unclear, we've talked about that. I see that a lot. People just join a board, but they don't really understand what's expected of them. It's not clear enough. And the board's role in the organisation is not set out clearly. So what am I talking about here? You know, have you ever experienced a board that has objectives? Okay, not individual trustee or board member objectives, but I'm talking about board objectives. It's a rhetorical question, don't all answer, but the best boards will have, you know, a couple of key points that they're working on over that year, and they will share those objectives with the executives and stakeholders, and they will reflect on them, you know, at meetings and say, well, we agreed at the start of this year that we were going to, I don't know, become a better team and get to know each other more. And, you know, if you get openness and trust in a team, you get better debates and better decisions ultimately. That could be a nice soft objective that the board revisits. It could be that the board is going to grow its profile with the executives in the organisation and build better relationships. Well, how are you doing against that? So again, it comes a bit back to performance, but I think objectives are really important, and owning them and reflecting back on them is key. And not having them will hinder progress. I was on a Santander webinar the other day for my business, and they were talking about how you get through times like this. And they gave a statistic, I can't remember it perfectly, but I'll be able to make the point. And the point is that only 3% of people set very clear objectives for what they want to achieve in their life and at work, and share them with others, and that's the important bit. And those 3% of people that do that and hold themselves to account through others hold something like 90-odd% of the world's wealth. And lots of other people that might set objectives but don't share them tend not to achieve them as consistently. That's the point I wanted to make. And then there's the lack of motivation and commitment. So I think the number one theme for me to high performance is having motivated and committed people. And back to the earlier discussion, I would always recommend that you go for somebody that's passionate, motivated, committed, going to give the time, going to give the energy, going to contribute the right behaviours, over perhaps the person that brings the name and the network and the black book or the money, because actually that can be counterproductive for culture and team performance. Okay, and when I'm recruiting, motivation and commitment are the two key things that I'm looking for. The skills, experience, background, all the other things, well, there's no point having them if you're not motivated and turning up. So critically, they're the things you should be looking at first and foremost. Having said that, that's why your external trustees have to play a massive role in coaching, supporting, guiding, maybe have a really strong vice chair that gets that and can mentor them along the way. Maybe make more of a point of it, you know, when people are running for president in the elections, that's a real part of the role. And I might want to look into what that means, because I suspect that lots of elected officers, you know, come into it and have no idea what the governance bit entails. So it's hard, is my answer, but there are lots of things you can do by having people that support that. And, you know, I firmly believe that it's such a valuable experience at such a young age that they shouldn't be expected to have, you know, the skills and experience that other people will have chairing boards of other sorts of charities. But what is it that they bring that's really important, and how can you guide and develop and support them through that? And how can everyone recognise that that's part of their role? I think that's how you should be looking at it. Yeah, broadly speaking, I mean, we tend to get this question about operational versus strategic and where that differs. So in small charities, like I'll use my example at Getting on Board, I'm very operational at the moment as a trustee because they're not a startup, but they're acting like a startup. And we need to break the cycle. We need to develop some income. I'm helping them develop a membership model, etc., etc. I'm really hands-on. So are all the trustees, and we're willing to be, because if we don't do that, then we've got some major risks around the organisation being largely led by one individual delivering everything. Penny's brilliant, but we need to break that. And in the short term, we're willing to become operational. We recognise that. Will I want to be operational and building stuff, you know, like an exec in many ways, as well as doing the scrutiny role in 18 months or 2 years? No, I won't. But I'm doing it now because I recognise what's needed. Okay, and I think this is the reality of business organizations. There's no such thing as a steady state. There's growth, there's change, there's decline, there's always constant challenge, and an organization's always going through that, and therefore the trustee board has to be fleet of foot and shift accordingly to support what the organization needs, particularly with charities, because they're resource scarce, resource limited, and the trustees bring a huge, the board brings a huge amount of resource, skills, experience that can be of support. So in your case, I think it's about, when it comes back to culture, it's about communications, it's about being very clear about tasks, it's about being very clear about this is a short-term thing and it's really important for the organisation. These are the reasons why we want people to do that. I think if people understand that it's a short-term thing and you know it's not the best governance, but it's the right thing for the organisation right now, that's good, that's fine, that's okay. How you separate the governance side becomes increasingly important, and the nature of the human dynamics, the relationships with the exec become more important, because the execs need to be able to say, you're coming too far now, you're stepping on our toes, you're getting in the way, and they need to be able to have that conversation in the right way. And likewise, you know, the trustees need to be able to reflect on each other and what they're doing. So there's a whole range of different factors involved here, Ben. I hope, you know, my sort of spouting of whatever's come into my head is going to be helpful, but it's okay is my key message, to do this when organisations need it for a time. You know, it's what happens. Well, the chair's a critical role. You need to have, it's an opportunity once every 3-6 years, whatever it might be, to get the best possible chair available. And I think you should always run an internal and external process at the same time. So look at what's available outside and benchmark that against the people inside. You know, have you thought creatively about the flexibility that you'll offer? You know, maybe you've got 2 people that would be great that could co-chair. I've seen that work really well in charities, or effectively job share, using their different strengths. But my answer would be always use the opportunity of chair recruitment to benchmark externally and internally against one another at the same time. And I would get a proper committee in place to do that, to be very clear about what it is that the chair needs to bring for the next term in the organisation. And, you know, if you can't meet that internally, you go externally. My comment about it's always better to recruit internally is because, you know, you give people aspiration to become the chair, you give them development, they know the culture. And when you land people in from the outside as a chair, it can be great, you know, if you need change, but it can be quite disruptive, and there can be quite a long learning curve too, in terms of the history and the culture. But yeah, it's an opportunity to do it properly and look widely.